Welcome back to another action figure review. In today's episode, we're going to be taking a look at the history of the Dalek set number 18, which is based on the story Resurrection of the Daleks, circa 1984. Yada yada yada. So this is a set that has confused fans because a lot of people were expecting these last year, but for some reason they decided to skip ahead and went to the story Revelation of the Daleks instead. So now it's nice that we finally have them, but before we get into all of that, let's begin by taking a look at the box. Looking at the packaging, it's the same standard that we get with these sets these days. You've got that lovely vibrant white colour going around the box with the lovely new Doctor Who logo, TARDIS on the side, that gold sticker that we see on all of the B&M sets, the name of the set, as well as the story that the set is based on. And then on the back, you've got a sort of long synopsis about the story. Shame there isn't a history about the props anymore. I think they stopped doing that now, which is a bit of a shame. I always like to read about that, but I guess if you're not a sado like me, then you're not going to be actually getting any pleasure out of it. And then obviously another thing to mention is that the box has this lovely blue glow surrounding the window box, which is the colour representing the Fifth Doctor's era. And it looks nice, I guess. You know, it would have been better choosing a different colour because I feel like we're getting loads of blues and purples to represent each Doctor. Opening up the box, the figures do look fantastic. And finally, we get some very nice updated versions of some very rare figures. So beginning with the Dalek drone, as he is the one that most fans are probably after the most. Originally, this version was released in a massive 4-pack with Davros, the Doctor, Supreme Dalek, of course, and the drone. But they made that drone a more bluish colour. It was like a bluish grey, from what I can remember. And comparing one of the versions of that Dalek side by side, yeah, I never understood why they did it. To me, it didn't really represent the prop at all. I know in some of the promotional images, they looked kind of bluish in a sense, but then again, that could be down to the grading of the photos. I don't think it really represented the props whatsoever, and I'm kind of glad that they've gone with this. However, I know a lot of fans have stated that this version is unfortunately inaccurate in itself, as the grey is slightly too light, and it should be darker from what I've been told. It's a bit of a shame, but at the end of the day, I still think personally the grey here looks a lot better than what we got in the past. It looks more accurate to what we saw on screen. I don't think those original ones looked accurate whatsoever. Those versions kind of look like they were from a comic book or something like that, you know, like when they had these sort of wacky colours in the comic books, especially in the 60s and the 80s. But here, I think this version looks a lot better. I know a lot of people aren't as happy, but you know what? I still think this one's much better and much superior. But at the end of the day, that is down to you. Some people do like those original versions. So starting at the top with every other Dalek, you've got the amazing dome lights with the black ridge going around the bottom to represent the sort of base or whatever it was to secure the domes in place. The eye is brand new. I originally thought these were just the same as the other ones, but apparently not. Apparently this is a new sculpt. You've got the black eyeball at the end with the small pupil, which is very accurate to the prop itself. You've also got a new alignment of the eye rings, which is quite cool. There's less rings this time, as it was on the 80s props. And then moving down to the neck bin, same as usual. You've got the lovely mesh detailing going along all around the neck. You've also got the rings going down, all painted in that nice grey, as well as the little struts going along, also painted in that grey colour. And then moving down, just like we saw on the Necros Daleks last year, you've also got that raised little section. Unfortunately, it is missing the mesh detailing because technically that is what it's meant to be, but it's a nice added detail nonetheless. And then moving down to the midsection, you've got the vertical slats that are seen on every other Dalek toy, with the slats themselves being painted in a gloss black and the mesh just being painted in a standard grey. Now, if you have got the Chase variant, I will point this out now. There is two versions. The first version is just a standard grey going along the mesh, but if you pick up the variant set, this is only a slight difference, but you've got like this sort of silver section being painted along the bottom half of the mesh. Now, this is to represent one of the props that was seen in the show. I don't know the numbering of whatsoever. I'm not an expert on these Daleks. It does represent one of the props, and it does turn up quite frequently in the episode itself, whereas the other one is actually missing that. So if you're into buying your Chase variants, then I highly recommend trying to sort both of them out. I certainly did, because I thought, well, it'd be interesting to bulk up the army of these, or even display one of these with the Necros Daleks, as technically the props didn't change whatsoever in that following story. Paying attention to the gun and plunger, these have just been painted in a gloss black, which is very nice and very detailed. There is no paint bleeds whatsoever, and it looks really nice. And then paying a close attention to the gun, you've also got the little red dot that was seen inside the gun, like we saw on the previous 5 Doctors set. This has also been carried on here to represent the petals that used to fly out when the Dalek would exterminate someone. It's something that I always thought was really cool. I know they can't actually sculpt the detailing on, but the paint does represent it quite well. And I'm kind of glad that they carried on this detail to these guys. To finish things off here, you've also got the little black oval between the gun and the plunger, again painted in a gloss black. It's a nice uniform. And then moving down to the skirt, this too has been painted really nicely, with the skirt painted in that lovely grey and the hemispheres painted in a gloss black. And then finally taking a look at the fender, this has just been painted in black mostly, but then you've got the return of the scuff marks going all the way along the fender, which again I think is a nice little touch and makes it look like it's been in through a battle or two. It's just a nice attention to detail really, and I think it looks really nice here. As well as that, they've also used a toothed ear fender that has been used on most of these guys now, and I think it works a lot better than what we saw in the past with the original ones only having one tier. I think this one's more accurate, I believe, so, you know, touche to character options. And yeah, overall I think this is a nice little toy. If you did miss out on those original versions, then I highly recommend trying to pick this one up. Or even if you do own the originals like myself, I'd still recommend trying to track these guys down. I think this represents the prop slightly better than those original ones. Not to say that they're bad, I just think these ones in particular are slightly better in my opinion. I think the detailing on here is probably closer to what we saw on screen than what we saw in the past, but if you're a bit upset about the grey not being correct, then maybe give this one a miss. And then moving on to the big boy himself, the Supreme Dalek. Now this is based on the version that was seen throughout the story, and he's not really in it that much. He only ever really appears in the Dalek mothership. He doesn't really go around anywhere else, as I believe to bulk up the Dalek army, when the Daleks were seen in the space station where Davros was kept, they actually repainted the Supreme Dalek to look like a grey drone throughout the story. They filmed the mothership scenes later on, and that is really why we never saw him in any other scenes. Again, a very detailed figure. It represents the prop really well personally. So beginning with the head, again, dome lights look really nice. You've got the same sort of black ridge detailing going along the bottom of the dome lights. You've got the same eye that is seen on the drone, again very detailed, and doesn't seem to be any bleeds on mine. Moving down to the neck bin, again same details here, but just painted in a gloss black instead of the grey that we see on the drone. Very lovely, a very good attention to detail. You've got the same sort of race section going along the bottom. The mid section here has all been painted mostly in black, with sections like the mesh being painted in silver. Again, same detailings like the gun having the little orange dot to represent the petals. And then moving down to the skirt, this is something that I always thought was quite unique with this Dalek. You have the white hemispheres on the black skirt, which I think stands out quite well. I always thought this one was a bit more unique than the one we saw in Remembrance. I don't know what it is that stands out with this one, but it just looks really, really cool. I think the hemispheres here really do make the props stand out. And then just like on the Dalek drone, the fender here has just been painted in black with the silver scuff marks going along the top. Now I did do my homework on this one. Now the fender shouldn't really be like this, as I have seen some images going along on the internet, especially when they made their appearance in Blue Peter. The fender itself is just a matte black, and if I get a photo up on screen here, you can see that there is no sort of detailing. But then again, you could probably argue and say, well, it doesn't appear on the drone. So I think personally, just to give the whole toy a nice uniformed look, I probably would have gone with just a straight black finish on the bottom, just like the original one did. But I won't deduct points from this, as it doesn't really take anything away from the toy. Comparing it to the original, this one isn't as glossy, but from what I can tell in the actual story, I don't think the prop itself is that glossy anyway. I think they may have gone a bit too overboard here. Not a bad thing. I think it's still a nice, fantastic toy, but there's something about the original where I think, yeah, they kind of got it right the first time around. Like I said, I'm not going to deduct points because this is such a rare figure. The original variant of this figure is extremely hard to get these days, and to be fair, mine is starting to wear out, so it's nice to get an upgrade, and he will probably take centre stage when displaying them all on the shelf. I think the only thing that I prefer on the original is that the gloss on there is very tones down. Now, I personally don't know if that's down to the fact of wear and age over time, but I can never remember it being that glossy. It's more of a satin look personally, so I think they should have gone really down that route, but at the end of the day, it's still a nice toy nonetheless. For articulation with these Daleks, if you've owned any Dalek toy in the past, you kind of know what you're going to be getting here. The dome does a full 360 turn. the eye can pivot up and down, gun and plunger are on ball joints so you can pose them in any way possible, and then to finish things off, you've got 3 wheels at the bottom, 2 standard being at the back, and then a wheel that's on a sort of pivot, giving the Dalek a full range of mobility, so go mad with it. On a whole, I still think this is a really good set nonetheless. I know a lot of people were miffed last year because they kind of missed out on this set, and I kind of guess why they did it was just so there was a bit more variety on the shelf. It's not the first time they've done it, and it most likely won't be the last. I know they did it earlier on with the 60s Daleks, where they didn't want to have 2 silver variants on the shelf, meaning that the general consumer is probably not going to be interested in buying both because they kind of look the same. I mean, hell, it's just a slightly different shade of grey, for God's sake. So when they announced that they weren't going to be doing this set last year, I kind of assumed that was the same reason. They just wanted something different on the shelf, and that is why we got the Necros Daleks. I think they kind of did the smart move with moving this one along till next year, and it's nice to have them now. I think if you did miss out on that original set and you're after these guys, I highly recommend trying to pick these up. They have distributed these sets quite well this year from what I've seen, so do have a good time hunting them. I know for a fact that they've announced the new sets, so these are probably going to be flying from the shelves, so do try and get these as soon as possible. I think out of the Dalek sets we're getting this year, this one has got to be my favourite, but saying that, the new Parting of the Ways set that is coming out does look really good. So that pretty much wraps up this review. If you've liked what you've seen, then yeah, I highly recommend trying to buy the sets, and I shall see you soon. By the way, subscribe.